We like to think of Hollywood as a magical place where everything on screen is make-believe, yet behind the glitz and glamour, film studios can be incredibly dangerous.
This morning, horror and heartbreak, the film industry reeling from what many are calling an unfathomable mistake, with new details released overnight about the moments before this tragic and deadly act.
In 2021, cinematographer Helena Hutchins was accidentally shot and killed on the set of Alec Baldwin's film Rust. One might assume that in an era with strict workplace safety laws, such tragedies would be impossible. However, on-set accidents have been far more common than most realize. Over the past century, there have been dozens of fatalities related to on-set mishaps, from a man killed and nearly devoured by a lion, to a sound tech accidentally shot by police while filming a reality show. This is the history of fatal accidents in Hollywood. The film industry is over 100 years old. The earliest recorded on-set fatality occurred in 1914, during the silent film Across the Border. Actress Grace McHugh was filming a scene in which her character crossed a river on horseback. After being thrown from the horse, a nearby cameraman named Owen Carter jumped into the river to rescue her. He managed to drag her onto what he believed was a safe sandbar. Tragically, the sandbar turned out to be quicksand. Both McHugh and Carter drowned while the rest of the crew watched helplessly from the shore. During the silent era, stunt doubles were not yet common, so actors frequently performed their own dangerous stunts regardless of their training or physical fitness. As a result, it wasn't unusual for actors to suffer broken bones and other injuries. Initially, some speculated that the incident was staged. Some newspapers even claimed that McHugh had fallen from a canoe instead of her horse. Carter's body was found a mile away, and McHugh was discovered days later, 9 miles from the sandbar. Although the film was completed, all known copies of Across the Border are now lost.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
One of the most famous directors of not just the silent era, but of all time, is Cecil B. DeMille. He even has a Golden Globe Award named in his honor. Yet in 1915, a serious accident occurred on the set of his film The Captive. In an effort to achieve authenticity, DeMille instructed his actors to use real bullets to shoot at a door, then to reload their rifles with blanks and fire at one another. Unfortunately, one actor mistakenly loaded live ammunition, accidentally killing an extra. Despite his fame, DeMille's sets were notorious for accidents. In 1929, during the filming of The Godless Girl, actress Lena Basquette performed in a scene set in a real burning building. Although DeMille covered her with fire repellent, it couldn't prevent her eyebrows and eyelashes from catching fire. Basquette also suffered burns on her arm, and the fire repellent contained asbestos, which is now known to be a carcinogen. DeMille's disregard for safety did not end with The Godless Girl. In 1947, while filming Unconquered, 9 actors were burned when he decided to use real fireballs and flaming arrows. Later, during the filming of The Ten Commandments, an actor carrying a torch tripped, setting another actor's costume ablaze. In that same scene, several actors were bitten by cobras and stung by scorpions because real animals were being used instead of props. And in yet another DeMille production, The Crusades, a group of horses fell from a moat. The injuries were so severe that the horses had to be euthanized. The actors riding them were injured as well and requested hazard pay, which DeMille refused, claiming it was their own fault that the scene was ruined. Believe it or not, most on-set deaths aren't due to bullets or fire. Many accidents involve airplanes. Although air travel is statistically safe, in Hollywood, aircraft are often part of the most perilous stunts. During the 1920s, at least a dozen film crew members died in accidents involving airplanes. But perhaps the most shocking silent era incident occurred on the set of King of the Jungle, when Gordon Standing, a friend of one of the actors, was attacked and killed by a lion. It was incidents like these, along with a tragic event during the filming of Noah's Ark, that finally pushed film studios to take safety more seriously. For the flood scene in Noah's Ark, 600,000 gallons of water were used on a set, resulting in the deaths of 3 extras and dozens of injuries, including 1 leg amputation. That day, 35 ambulances were called. Following this disaster, regulations were introduced to define what stunts could be performed and to hold producers and directors accountable for the safety of their teams. But these increased safety measures didn't stop a suspicious incident that occurred on the set of The Road Back, a film about soldiers returning home from World War I. Expert marksman and ex-Marine George Daly was tasked with firing live machine gun ammunition at actors during a battle scene. Although no actors were harmed by his shots, Daly was killed in an explosion on the set. It later emerged that he had taken out a life insurance policy just 2 weeks before filming, a detail that has led some to speculate that his death might not have been entirely accidental. The 1941 film They Died with Their Boots On, which dramatized the life of General George Custer, was marked by 3 separate fatal incidents. One stuntman fell off his horse and broke his neck, another suffered a heart attack. Actor Jack Budlong, insisting on using a real sword instead of a prop, was thrown from his horse and was impaled by his own sword. In subsequent years, 2 additional actors died in horse-related accidents, one after being crushed by a tipping wagon, and another after falling off a horse while trying to retrieve his hat. During my research, I also discovered a very eerie case involving the 1956 film The Conqueror. With a cast and crew of 220, 91 individuals who worked on the film later developed some form of cancer. It was eventually revealed that the movie was filmed 137 miles downwind from the Nevada nuclear testing site. Although scientists have been unable to conclusively link the cancers to these nuclear tests, it still remains unsettling. During the 1960s, 34 films were marred by on-set accidents, including 4 James Bond films. Although none of these mishaps were fatal, many were bizarre. For example, during the filming of From Russia with Love, director Terrence Young was caught in a helicopter crash. He had to jump into the ocean to escape and nearly drowned in the process. In Goldfinger, Harold Sakata, who portrayed Oddjob, accidentally set his hand on fire. Meanwhile, in Thunderball, a stuntman almost drowned after disconnecting his air tank. And in You Only Live Twice, a cameraman's foot was severed by a gyrocopter blade. Ironically, that same cameraman would later lose his life on the set of Catch-22 when he refused to wear a safety harness and fell from an airplane, plummeting 4,000 feet into the Pacific Ocean. The Bond films were not totally spared from tragedy. A fatality did occur during the filming of the 1981 Bond film For Your Eyes Only. During a high-speed chase in a bobsled, a wrong turn led to a collision with a tree, killing one of the stuntmen. In the 1970s, movies became bigger and bolder, and the success of the Bond films only accelerated the popularity of the action-adventure genre. Film crews increasingly relied on helicopters and airplanes, a trend that unfortunately resulted in more crashes. In 1970 alone, 9 people died while filming scenes involving these aircraft. These accidents continued throughout the decade. In fact, the movie Superman is dedicated to Terry Hill, who died on set. His accident actually involved a stationary plane. While preparing for a scene, the wing of a prop airplane broke off and fell on Hill, who was standing beneath it. Even some of the era's most famous and critically acclaimed films were not without their infamous incidents. During a scene in The Godfather in which James Caan's character beat up his brother-in-law, portrayed by Gianni Russo, Caan actually threw Russo over a fence and slammed a real garbage can on him. Russo ended up with 2 broken ribs and a sprained elbow. In another film, Apocalypse Now, Director Francis Ford Coppola had actor Martin Sheen smash a real mirror, cutting his hand in the process. Allegedly intoxicated at the time, Sheen didn't immediately realize he was bleeding. He would suffer a heart attack on set a few weeks later. Although Apocalypse Now was filmed in the Philippines, it is set during the Vietnam War. Coppola even attempted to secure permission to film in Vietnam where the war was still raging. As the 1980s dawned, television networks sought to compete with movies by incorporating more action sequences into their shows. Series like The Dukes of Hazzard became famous for their elaborate car chases and stunts. In 1980, a cameraman filming a chase scene from inside a van was killed when the vehicle flipped over, injuring 12 other crew members. Reports later revealed that recent rain had softened the dirt road, and despite producers' belief that the conditions were safe, the wet surface caused the van to slide and tip over.
This is Eldrick Tiger Woods, and Eldrick is an accomplished golfer. He wins tournaments on a regular basis.
Even reality shows weren't immune to danger. One such show, titled That's Incredible, featured stunts that were generally harmless, like a young Tiger Woods, just 12 years old, performing a few golf tricks. However, on an episode that aired on July 6, 1980, a man attempting to jump over two cars on a motorcycle encountered disaster. The cars were barreling towards him at 100 miles per hour. He crashed and suffered major injuries to his foot and knees. 2 months later, on the same show, stuntman Gary Wells attempted an even more daring feat, jumping over the fountains at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. Wells missed his landing and struck a barrier wall, injuring 6 spectators. In the process, he tore the main artery in his heart, broke his legs and pelvis, and suffered a severe concussion. All of these accidents would pale in comparison to what happened on the set of the 1981 film Roar. The production of Roar is infamous for its chaos, directed by Noel Marshall, who also starred as a man living on a wildlife preserve. The film was a passion project for the Marshall family, who had even adopted several lions in real life. Marshall's wife, Tippi Hedren, and daughter, Melanie Griffith, also appeared in the film. Filming began in 1976 and stretched on for 5 years, ultimately ending in a colossal box office failure, earning only $2 million against a $17 million budget. But the on-set events were almost as legendary as the film's financial collapse. Over 70 people were attacked by animals, including lions. Marshall later admitted that he lost track of the injuries, estimating that nearly 100 individuals were hurt during production. He himself was bitten 11 times by lions. At one point, a lion bit his arm so badly that he nearly lost it. Tippi Hedren was bitten on the head by a lion before filming even began, and was later seriously injured by an elephant during a scene. Their daughter, Melanie Griffith, was also attacked by a lion so badly that she required facial reconstructive surgery. Even the family's son, John, was not spared. A lion clung to him so fiercely that it took 6 men to pry the animal off. To add insult to injury, the set was flooded, several lions escaped, and local sheriff's deputies eventually had to shoot some of the animals after they were found roaming a nearby town. That same year, a stuntman died on the set of Sword and the Sorcerer, and a few years later, another lost his life on the set of The Right Stuff when he failed to open his parachute. However, in 1983, one of the worst accidents in Hollywood history occurred on the set of The Twilight Zone, the movie. Unlike most incidents, this tragedy was not swept under the rug.
The scene for a movie version of Twilight Zone attempted to recreate the terror and the carnage of the hell that was Vietnam. And then, as the crew watched in horror early this morning, the make-believe dissolved, and actor Vic Morrow and 2 Vietnamese children were killed. As David Dow reports, the Twilight Zone became a nightmare.
During the filming of a single scene, a helicopter crashed, killing actor Vic Morrow and 2 child actors. California labor laws strictly regulate when and how child actors may work, but it was later revealed that director John Landis had violated several of these laws. The 2 children were not officially hired and were being paid under the table. Moreover, they were forced to work around explosives, an outright violation of the law. Shockingly, one producer even advised the children's parents not to alert any fire safety officials about their involvement. While no one was ultimately prosecuted for the illegal hiring of the children, several film crew members were charged with manslaughter. Investigations determined that the crash was triggered by a special effects explosion set off too close to the helicopter, which had been instructed to fly lower than safety protocols allowed. The resulting blast caused the pilot to lose control. Although all of the accused were eventually acquitted of criminal wrongdoing, the families of Vic Morrow and the two children sued and were awarded millions of dollars in damages. In the wake of the Twilight Zone incident, new rules regarding aircraft safety were implemented, leading to a nearly 70% decrease in on-set accidents in the following years. Yet just a few years later, another fatal helicopter crash occurred on the set of the 1980s action series Airwolf, and in the same year, while filming Runaway Train, another helicopter pilot was killed after striking power lines, and a third person died that same year on the set of Rambo First Blood Part 2 when he was knocked off a ledge. Rambo wasn't the only film starring Sylvester Stallone to make headlines that year. Rocky IV premiered on November 21st, 1985, co-starring Dolph Lundgren, a karate champion and former bodyguard. The two stars agreed to actually spar on camera to make the fight scenes look real. During filming, Lundgren struck Stallone so hard in the chest that Stallone's heart swelled, sending him into intensive care for 8 days.
My name is Stephen King. I've written several motion pictures, but I want to tell you about a movie called Maximum Overdrive, which is the first one I've directed. Wow.
A year later, on the set of Stephen King's Maximum Overdrive, cinematographer Armando Nanuzzi lost an eye in a freak accident. A remote-controlled lawnmower hit a block of wood, sending splinters flying into his face. Nanuzzi later sued King, who not only wrote but also directed the film. King admitted that he was under the influence of cocaine for most of the production, and other members of the film crew have stated that King would drink heavily every morning. King has not directed a major film since. In another incident, an actor on the film Cyborg lost an eye when Jean-Claude Van Damme accidentally punched him with a prop knife. The injured actor sued Van Damme and was awarded nearly $500,000. That same year, a cameraman was killed on the set of The Wraith when he crashed while filming a car chase. By the end of the 1980s, 11 more people had died while producing films. Although this video mainly focuses on accidents on American film sets, it's important to mention The Sword of Tipu Sultan, an Indian TV series released in 1990 that holds the record for most on-set deaths. A studio fire trapped production crew members, resulting in 62 fatalities and numerous injuries. The studio's limited safety equipment, poor ventilation, and several electrical hazards allowed the fire to spread rapidly and hinder escape. Sanjay Khan, who both directed the series and starred as the main character, was burned so badly that he spent 13 months in the hospital and underwent 72 surgeries. Shockingly, only 5,000 rupees, about $60 American, were paid to the victims' families. Following the earlier Twilight Zone tragedy, new safety guidelines were introduced for filming scenes with helicopters. Yet during the filming of Delta Force 2, another helicopter crash occurred, killing 5 people. Then in 1993, on the set of Sliver, a movie starring Sharon Stone, a helicopter crashed while filming a scene over an active volcano. While the crew survived, one cameraman was trapped in a crater for 2 days, and most of the footage was lost, forcing part of the film to be rewritten.
People once believed that when someone dies, a crow carries their soul.
15 other fatalities occurred on film sets during the 90s, including the well-known case of actor Brandon Lee from The Crow. On March 21, 1993, Brandon Lee, the son of actor and martial artist Bruce Lee, was filming a scene in which his character was to be shot. The production had used close-up shots of a .44 Magnum revolver. In an effort to make the scene appear more authentic, the crew replaced live rounds with prop cartridges. Instead of purchasing proper prop ammunition, they were in a hurry, and modified real bullets by emptying out the powder. It's believed that during this process, a bullet became lodged in the gun's barrel. When the crew later loaded the blanks into the revolver, the force of the blank's ignition fired the lodged bullet, striking Lee in the chest and killing him. A TV series based on The Crow, titled Stairway to Heaven, later suffered its own tragedy when a stuntman was killed by flying debris from an explosion. During the first decade of the 2000s, 17 people died on American sets or from injuries sustained while filming.
Have you been lucky?
Yeah, very lucky I'm still alive, mate.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, oh, crikey, I've been grabbed by crocs, pulled back down into the water. I've had black mambas nearly clip me on the ear, boom slang nearly take me thumb out. Mate, I've had more good luck than I could poke a stick at.
One notable incident occurred during the production of Ocean's Deadliest, a nature documentary featuring Steve Irwin, in which Irwin was fatally stabbed multiple times by a stingray. Tragedy also struck the set of Harry Potter. While filming the Deathly Hallows, a stuntman for Daniel Radcliffe, who played Harry Potter, was seriously injured. Stuntman David Holmes was pulled by a cable into the air in order to simulate being thrown by an explosion, but the cable pulled him with too much force, causing him to crash into a nearby wall, breaking his neck. The accident left Holmes paralyzed from the waist down. Since then, Holmes and Radcliffe have formed a very close friendship, and have even worked on a podcast together where they discuss the dangers of stunt work. HBO even filmed a documentary about him titled The Boy Who Lived. On the bright side, advancements in computer-generated imagery have begun to improve safety on set. The expansion of CGI in the 1990s and early 2000s transformed the special effects industry. Film crews no longer needed to build elaborate puppets or clay models, and green screens made dangerous stunts easier to simulate, often at a lower cost. Hollywood's only limit was now its imagination. But despite these technological advancements, even more people died on American productions in the 2010s than in the early 2000s. In one incident, 2 people lost their lives in a small plane crash while filming a documentary in Kenya, ironically titled Dangerous Flights. Tragedy also struck television. The long-running show Cops suffered a fatal accident in 2014. During an episode produced in Omaha, Nebraska, the Cops crew accompanied the local police to a robbery in progress at a Wendy's restaurant. When officers entered the restaurant and drew their weapons on a suspect armed with a handgun, a shootout ensued. Sound technician Bryce Dion was killed in the crossfire. It was later determined that the suspect, named Cortez Washington, actually had an airsoft gun that was designed to look real. Washington was a career criminal who had been in trouble multiple times in Kansas and Missouri and was out on parole. He and his girlfriend had also robbed a Little Caesars Pizza earlier that day using the same airsoft pistol. Dion had worked for Cops for 7 years, and this was also the first time in the history of the show that a crew member was seriously injured.
Is that all you got? Because if it is, I'm gonna have to kill you.
In 2015, on the set of Resident Evil: The Final Chapter, a crew member tragically lost his life when a Hummer fell on top of him. That wasn't the only mishap on this production. A few days earlier, stunt double Olivia Jackson was seriously injured in a motorcycle accident. While filming a scene, Jackson crashed her motorcycle into a camera arm. Her entire face was crushed, several arteries were severed, and one thumb, along with multiple fingers, had to be amputated. She was placed in a medically induced coma for several weeks, and a year later one of her arms also had to be amputated. Jackson later sued the producers, claiming that the director was partially responsible for the accident. After Jackson had rehearsed the scene twice, the director changed the camera angle and moved it to a new position without informing her, contributing to the mishap. Jackson ultimately won the lawsuit. All of this brings us to Rust, Alec Baldwin's passion project. Baldwin had long been a fan of Western films, and together with director Joel Souza, he developed the story. The film follows an aging outlaw named Rust, played by Baldwin, who helps his nephew escape after the nephew is sentenced to death for accidentally killing someone. A low-budget production, Rust was scheduled to be filmed in just 21 days. Production began on October 6, 2021, but was halted on the 21st when cinematographer Helena Hutchins was accidentally shot and killed by none other than Alec Baldwin. Although Baldwin has had a long and award-winning career in film and television, and maintained that he did not intentionally shoot Hutchins, nor was he aware the gun was loaded with a live round, he was charged in connection with her death. Ana Gutierrez Reed, who was responsible for the weapons on the set, also faced charges. This was only the second film on which Gutierrez Reed served as lead armorer. She had previously worked on The Old Way, during which several crew members complained about her negligence. One incident even led Nicolas Cage to walk off the set after she allegedly discharged a firearm without warning. David Halls, the assistant director on Rust, was also charged in connection with the incident and pled guilty to negligent use of a firearm. Halls had a history of disregarding safety protocols. He had been fired from the set of Freedom's Path after a firearm accidentally discharged and wounded a crew member, and there had been multiple complaints about his behavior on previous productions like One Way and Tiger Rising. Thus, two key members of the Rust production had histories of irresponsible behavior. Crew members later complained not only about these individuals, but also about the overall production practices on Rust.
A camera assistant on the film writes, "I've never worked on a show that cares so little for the safety of its crew." Adding, during the filming of gunfights, things are often played very fast and loose. There are no safety meetings these days.
It's important to note that Baldwin wasn't just an actor or co-writer. He was also one of the film's producers. Filming took place about an hour away from Albuquerque, New Mexico, where local accommodations were limited. Some crew members complained that after 13-hour workdays, they could only manage about 6 hours of sleep due to long commutes to distant hotels. Although the producers had reserved a few nearby rooms, these were only available to select crew members. In one shocking instance, a crew member was bitten by a brown recluse spider and nearly lost his arm as a result. Before the fatal shooting, there were already reports of multiple accidental firearm discharges on set.
Looper says there were multiple accidental discharges of firearms on set, telling the LA Times one happened when Baldwin's stunt double shot a gun he was told was cold, and another involved a woman in the props department who shot herself in the foot with a blank round.
It's been alleged that firearm safety sheets were supposed to be included with the daily call sheets, but this protocol was rarely followed. On the morning of October 21st, 7 members of the camera crew staged a walkout. In an anonymous letter, someone claimed that a few crew members had borrowed the prop guns and loaded them with live ammunition as a way to pass time by shooting at beer cans between scenes. The guns were later returned, but it seemed unclear whether they were rechecked afterwards. According to police, this account remains unconfirmed. Later that day, during rehearsal, Gutierrez Reed retrieved a Colt 45 from the gun safe and claimed she had checked it. Assistant Director Halls then took the gun and handed it to Baldwin.
When investigators asked Halls about safety protocols on set in the aftermath of the shooting, he said, "I checked the barrel of the gun for obstructions. The armorer opens the hatch and spins the drum, and I say, 'Cold gun on set.'"
Halls later confessed that he did not properly check the gun before doing so. Baldwin then pointed the gun at the camera and it went off, killing Hutchins and wounding director Souza. Baldwin has maintained that he never pulled the trigger and that the gun discharged unexpectedly. No one on set was wearing protective headphones or goggles. Although Halls has stated that Baldwin did not pull the trigger, an FBI report concluded that it was impossible for the gun to have been fired without someone doing so. The day after the shooting, Gutierrez Reed's lawyer asserted that the gun may have been sabotaged by a crew member involved in the earlier walkout. The lawyer claimed that someone might have placed a live round in the chamber. New Mexico's Occupational Safety and Health Bureau later fined the film's producers over $100,000 for failing to implement adequate worker safety measures, specifically citing Hall's decision to hand a loaded gun to Baldwin without checking. Both Baldwin and Gutierrez Reed were later charged with manslaughter. While many agreed that Gutierrez Reed should have been held accountable for her role in ensuring weapon safety, charging Baldwin raised questions. Baldwin contended that he was unaware that the gun was loaded, and he was led to believe it was harmless. His charges were initially dropped but then reinstated several months later. Some have speculated that Baldwin was unfairly targeted due to his celebrity status, suggesting that local authorities and the district attorney's office were eager to make an example out of him. In fact, the district attorney's office even appointed multiple special prosecutors for the case. The primary piece of evidence against Baldwin was that he himself had not conducted a safety check. The district attorney also felt that Baldwin, being a producer, should have been more responsible for everyone's safety. However, Baldwin's role as a producer was minimal, and there were several other producers on the film who were never charged. Ultimately, Assistant Director Halls pled guilty to negligence and received 6 months of probation, while Gutierrez Reed was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 8 months in prison. Baldwin's charges were eventually dismissed amid allegations that the prosecution had withheld evidence regarding the bullets. Recently, Baldwin announced that he is suing the Santa Fe District Attorney's Office for wrongful prosecution. While the dazzling spectacle of Hollywood captivates millions, these tragic accidents behind the scenes serve as a reminder that the safety of those who bring our favorite stories to life must never be taken for granted. It's easy to ignore safety procedures or just assume that they are overly cautious. But as we have seen with situations like those on the set of Rust, had people just followed these procedures, a tragedy could have easily been avoided. Thank you for watching, and if you thought this video was interesting, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing. Also, let me know in the comments your thoughts about Alec Baldwin and if he should have been prosecuted.